What, you may be asking yourself, is the latest environmental outrage from the Trump administration? Well, here's one of them. The Trump administration is relaxing, to use that strange media word, relaxing. It makes it sound pleasant, comfortable. They are relaxing rules around methane gas emissions in the oil and gas industry. And by relaxing, we mean making the world more perilous for the rest of us, which should not be a relaxing experience for anyone. And here to talk about that with us now is Aaron Mintzes. Aaron is the Senior Policy Counsel for Earthworks, the environmental group that has been tracking this disturbing development. And he joins us now. So first of all, Aaron, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me, Richard.
Secondly, okay, so you've worked in the environmental field for a while, and this is a relaxation, as I understand it, of Obama-era regulations. Is that correct?
Yes. The Obama administration instituted these regulations, I think, in the year 2016. It applies to new sources of oil and gas emissions. And what we see now is the second attempt that the Trump administration has made to roll these back. And this particular one is part one of two steps in the process, beginning with some leak detection and repair rollbacks and some of the monitoring and enforcement. And then what we expect to see is potentially a complete repeal.
So these are regulations. So there's two parts to it then, if I understand correctly. Part number one is that the industry was required by the Obama administration to monitor when they install new sources, when they create new sources of methane, to monitor for leaks. And then secondly, they're required to do something when they detect the leak. Because I imagine I'm oversimplifying, but that's the gist of it?
Well, that's exactly right. So what the Trump administration has done here is that they have weakened the safeguards in terms of the leak detection part, how often they're supposed to conduct the inspections, and also in terms of when they're supposed to fix them. How often are they supposed to look, and how quickly are they supposed to fix them? And so it's less quickly, and it's less often. And then more facilities will be exempt.
So are we looking at a situation where the risk of methane emission becomes significantly higher as a result of this action on their part?
That's exactly what EPA tells us. So they write this proposal, and they tell us right away that their proposal will result in higher instances of asthma, bronchitis, strokes, premature birth weight, low birth weight, sudden death, and so we're going to see an extra 380,000 tons of methane just over the next 6 years. Going to be 3,800 tons of hazardous air pollutants, and 100,000 more tons of volatile organic compounds just in the next 6 years, just because of this one piece, this one revision about how quickly we check our leaks, how often we inspect some of these facilities. And EPA has, this is an enormous giveaway, of course, to the oil and gas industry. EPA has refused to quantify how much these health effects that they know, that they tell us will happen, they've refused to quantify for us how much that's really going to cost us. Of course, they're happy to suggest this is going to be a huge windfall for the oil and gas industry, but we don't really know how much it's really going to cost the rest of us.
So they're saying more Americans will develop bronchitis, more Americans will develop asthma, more Americans, babies will suffer low birth weight, but we're doing it anyway. And do we have a sense of how much this is saving the oil and gas industry? How much money?
They've estimated in the amount, I believe the number is about $484 million.
You know, forgive me for saying this, but because no matter what amount of money was involved, I'd be for less. I'm four square on the side of less asthma and babies, healthier babies. I just clear that. But that said, $480 million seems like a small amount of money to the oil and gas industry that is a multi-billion-dollar industry, as I understand it. So what the Trump administration is basically saying to us, and I'm looking for the rationale here, but what they're basically saying is to save a fractional amount of money for the industry, we are willing to get a whole lot of Americans very sick. Am I missing a side to their argument that that I don't know about?
The only side that you're missing here is that actually this is a pretty cost-effective rule already. This rule already saves the oil and gas industry money. The EPA claims that all of a sudden this rule is going to save the industry so much money if they roll it back is belied by the actual evidence we see. But let's go back to the health effects too, right? We're not talking about what that costs in terms of emergency room visits, in terms of healthcare costs. The real social costs that are typically associated with rolling back public health protections, these are not really adequately calculated here in the Trump administration's proposal. But even if they were, the way that they characterize the so-called burden upon the industry of this is completely mischaracterized. As a matter of fact, Colorado has a methane rule that the oil and gas industry says we can comply with this. It saves us money. The same is true in California and in Wyoming. It's pretty clear that in major producing oil and gas states, not only does the industry not have any trouble with complying with the rule, but in fact, we know that it's cost effective and it saves them money. Why? They're capturing the very product they wish to sell to market. All we're asking them to do is check it out and then plug the leaks. They save more of it, they make more money.
So in other words, what you're saying, and again, we're talking with Aaron Mintzes of Earthworks Senior Policy Council. So in other words, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that this methane that would be lost into the atmosphere is, in effect, their inventory.
That's exactly.
So as long as they're monitoring for leaks, they're not only protecting the public's health, but they're making sure they don't lose something that they could sell and make money from. Is that right?
That's kind of the heart of the cost effectiveness of this rule. When you plug a leak or when you capture the gas, that's what they want to sell. So this is a cost-effective rule. The Obama administration proposed it. It was not as if like it was that strong a rule to begin with, and to be honest with you. And now we know after a year or so of experience in terms of the implementation of the rule, we know from the studies that have conducted, we know from what the industry has said, they can comply.
And it was not that strong a rule because, I'm guessing, for one thing, because it only applies to new sources of methane, and not to ongoing sources of methane. And secondly, because I would imagine they're not being required to monitor constantly, they're not being required. In other words, it was a fairly industry-friendly, it was not at all, as you say, onerous. So what's the logic? Again, I keep struggling. I guess there is no logic except they wanted to give even more. Because the oil and gas industry is not struggling for its financial survival. It does not need every little giveaway it can get, right? It's pretty financially sound. That's my understanding. And so is this something a lobbyist dreamed up, or is this something, are the Koch brothers just so deeply embedded with the Trump administration that they said we want this and they did it? Do we know how this came to be?
Oh, sure. So this oil and gas methane rule out of EPA is one of several that the president has targeted in an executive order he issued, back in March, I believe, of 2017, shortly after his inauguration. And ultimately, it is a giveaway to the oil and gas industry. And it's not because the oil and gas industry really needs it, but the Trump administration really wants to be able to do favors for a number of those industry folks. And to be honest with you, while publicly many of them might say that they are encouraged by what the Trump administration is doing, I suspect at the end of the day they prefer to keep things the way that they are because it actually encourages more regulatory certainty. The very thing, what's so odd about this, Richard, is that the very thing that the oil and gas industry claims that they seek, money savings and regulatory certainty, the rule as it is provides. And we know this by the way that they have complied with it, by the cost effectiveness, the money that they saved. And the truth is, the oil and gas industry doesn't want to have to go back and forth to court every 6 to 9 to 12 months to try to litigate what the regulations are supposed to be.
So this is a hazier, this rollback is hazier than the current state of affairs. Not to mention that if the presidency changes, they may find themselves facing a new set of rules that may even be more onerous than the Obama rules were. So is this, you said the first stage of this has been rolled out? So what's the second stage, and what, if anything, is the opportunity to push back on what the Trump administration is doing?
So I believe yesterday the Trump administration published in the Federal Register a notice of stage one, which is the rollback of some of the leak detection, the monitoring, and the inspections of some of these facilities. That touched off a 60-day comment period, which I guess lasts for another 60 days or so, at which time I think the EPA will ultimately finalize what I expect will be a rule similar to what they've proposed. After that, at some point, we expect a second proposal where the EPA may ultimately try to undo much of the rest of the rule that required certain technologies that be placed on to capture more of the gas.
So who gets to comment during this 60-day comment period?
I will. You
I can too. I can go. Where would a person go to find out more about all
So
of this?
there are two opportunities. So there is actually a public hearing that the EPA will host in Denver, Colorado. As far as I'm aware, they've not yet announced the date or any of the logistical information for that hearing, but it will be posted on their website. But any person can comment into the docket on EPA's proposal.
And is it considered a legitimate comment to write, "Are you effing kidding me"?
Yes. Now, I don't think that...
Might not be persuasive, though.
Well, I don't expect that the agency is going to is going to yield to what it is that we actually have wanted them to do, and I base that upon our experience commenting to them before on this rule.
Right, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So, okay, so where can people find out more about this? Do you guys have more information on your website about this, or is there someplace people can go?
Sure. People who are interested in this rule can go to earthworks.org, or they can go to the regulations.gov site and search for the EPA methane rollback. But we have a lot of information on our earthworks.org site that can provide folks and direct folks where they want to go to figure out what it is that is happening and what it is that they can do about it.
And I know we've had your executive director on, but as long as you're on Earthworks, good name, by the way. I like that name. What else are you doing? What else are you guys involved in? What's your general mission statement for folks?
Well, we do two things. We protect communities and the environment from the impacts of energy and mineral development. So while we focus also on sustainable solutions as well. We're an extractive industries focused advocacy organization. Oil, gas, mining, and then we focus on solutions to that. And the truth is, aside from any kind of environmental specialization, there's really only one issue going on these days, and it's climate change. It's the only environmental issue out there. And so everything ultimately leads back to that.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Aaron Mintzes, Senior Policy Counsel for Earthworks at earthworks.org. Thanks for investigating this issue, and thanks for coming on the program and explaining it to us.
Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate it.